Hello and welcome to episode 130 of the Adoption and Fostering podcast with me, Scott Casson-Rennie, him,
Al Coates,
her,
Paula Coates,
and him,
Tristan Casson-Rennie.
Hello.
Here we go again. Here we go again. Here we go again.
What could possibly go wrong?
Again. Nothing.
Again.
Absolutely nothing. All good.
Well, it's lovely to have you here, Paula.
Thank you. It's a long time since I've been here. Was it last year? Last Christmas?
It was, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, they keep us locked away for a year.
For good reason.
Well, promised them more, I think, but never mind.
But you were the 6th most popular episode last year as well. I just wanted to make that clear to you as well.
There you go.
Not quite top 5.
Well, yeah, but you hit on a nerve. You spoke. The topic we spoke on was relationships, and we aired our foibles within our own relationships as the result of caring for interesting children. So this year we thought rather than rehash that, we could maybe do something different. Is there anything you two would like to talk about? Anything you'd like? Any dirty water you'd like to get off your chest?
Yeah.
There's plenty of that. I'm not sure if it's suitable for podcasts.
Fair enough.
Is it, Paula?
That put that one away then, didn't it? So
yeah.
What should we talk about then, Al, if they've not got anything interesting to say? Come on.
Well, that's fine. I mean, I've got topics coming out of the wazoo. So I was really interested to kind of talk about therapy, because I think that it's something that a lot of adoptive parents, it's like this shiny castle on a hill that adoptive parents are striving towards. Like, if I can get my children into a good therapeutic intervention, then we're going to be able to kind of maybe fix all of some of this behavior or some of these emotional challenges or mental health or yada, yada, yada. So I just wanted to get your reflections and experience on sort of accessing support, the challenges of accessing support, also what benefits support has been, like that therapeutic intervention, therapy. I mean, yeah, so Trish, before we started, I mentioned the subject, and you kind of, off the top of your head, you just reeled off a list of different interventions. So go on then. You start.
Well, we have done a number of interventions which have included DDP, which is dyadic developmental psychotherapy. If you haven't heard of that, DDP is kind of the buzzword. We've also engaged in art therapy, and we've play therapy as well. So they're kind of the three that we've had the most experience of. They're helping others, but I suppose the first thing to kind of say is that I go into these thinking, okay, what's going to happen, and how are we going to get on, and what the outcomes are likely to be. And it usually ends up with me coming home and talking to Scott and saying, oh, we need to try this at home, or we need to try that at home. And perhaps if we adjust our parenting style a little bit here or there, things might work a little bit differently for us. So whilst the focus has always been around asking for help for child number 1, 2, or 3 with particular therapies, it always ends up that one or both of Scott and I will kind of pick over it when we get back from the session and see what we can do differently. So the therapy really does work for us too. We probably wouldn't admit that going into it, but with hindsight, it really has helped all of us.
I mean, is that what you've gone looking for? I mean, like, you've gone looking for something for your children, and not even thinking that you were on the agenda. Is that maybe how you start?
Very much so, because usually therapies come about because you hit that dead end of, oh my God, what do I need to do now? Because I just don't know what to do next. Pick up the phone, talk to a social worker. They talk about a therapy that you've never heard of and don't even know what it means. And then you go, yes, because, that's being offered. And let's face it, when something's being offered, you grab it with both hands if there's an opportunity for it to make life better. And then, of course, the appointment comes through and we have this tussle of, are you going or am I going, or who's going, or should we both go, or are we allowed to go? So we go through that a bit. And usually, I will say that the result is based around how near the closest coffee shop is to who's got to sit out of the session, as to who goes in the session. And then we kind of get home and unpick it together. So we would either go independently and then we'd come home and talk about it. And certainly with DDP, we had to go as a family quite often. So that was always an interesting car journey on the way home, because it gave us that non-eye contact time to talk about stuff after the therapy session. Yeah. And again, DDP works in such a way that often a lot of the time is spent where the child is with the therapist and we would be sitting in the waiting room. And then we would be brought together to talk as a group. And so when you've got sort of 20, 25 minutes of downtime as a couple sitting in a waiting room, you do tend to sit and talk and wonder what the conversation is going on behind the room or in the room that you're not in. I think, some of the therapies that we've attended have been really, really positive, and some I've come away from thinking, well, I'm not sure what progress was made there, and, what do we do next?
I was thinking about how, because you probably, Paula, you've done most of that kind of sitting in waiting rooms, haven't you, for us? So, but how many years back have we been going to therapy? It must be, 10 years?
Well, I think we started off going to a lot of kind of training things, like Dan Hughes, and spent a lot of time and a lot of money on books and looking at therapeutic stuff for the kids. It did always help us along the way, but I think for me, one of the real times where the light went on for me was when I decided to do a child psychotherapy course. It was a 3-year course, and at the end of it to come out as a psychotherapist, but actually I didn't want to be a psychotherapist. I just wanted to do this course to learn about my own children and about myself. And it was absolutely incredible for me, because I just found that the psychotherapy side of things, you had to take part yourself. And, you had to do the play therapy, you had to learn, the art therapy, all of the different things, but also had to see a therapist to be able to be a child psychotherapist. And so sitting with a therapist is something very new to me. I'd never done it before. But I would say I'm very much a different person now. Well, I am, to what I was before I started that therapy. It was, it was a couple of years of it, as well as going into a course. And there was so many things I would kind of come out of the weekend or come out of the room with the therapist and just literally feel as if I'd left something of me behind, an old me. And so it was really helpful for me to kind of understand my own triggers of my past, and how I was with the kids and my reaction to stuff, and sometimes maybe an overreaction which was coming from my past. And I saw the world with different eyes. And I think for me, I just really saw that actually as adopted parents, probably one of the most important things that should be done before people adopt is to actually have some psychotherapy, some as a couple or as individuals, because it definitely changes the way that you kind of operate yourself. I still now, even though that was years ago, I still now kind of have to think, Rachel, my therapist, I think, what would she say to me right now in this situation? And it really helps, because you can kind of separate yourself from that. So just in light of bringing up the adoptive children, we have got one therapist in our lives at the moment, and she's kind of helping us with one particular child, and she's been incredible.
What type of therapy is that?
Psychotherapy.
Right. I kind of lost track, because I think that we've had so many different. We've had DDP. We've had. Have we done any play therapy?
No, I think psychotherapy's pretty different, because psychotherapy is looking at you personally, and looking at the individual. So when we're talking to this particular therapist at this point, she's been able to really let us kind of know what is going on in us and what's going on in the child as well. And it's making you kind of think, I would never see it like that from the child's perspective, actually, yes. And I think we've kind of gone in a few times, being absolutely like weighed down with, oh my goodness, it's the end, everything's fallen apart, this is really awful. And we've come out just with a weight lifted off our shoulders. And it's not, she's just kind of been able to explain where the child is at this point, but also very much worried about Al and I, who are not looking after ourselves well enough. She sees that we are kind of heading again to kind of this breakdown situation where we're becoming quite unwell. And she just, you know, she's just really helped us to kind of say, right, well, this is what it is, and that we can't actually fix anything, that because I'm a fixer, can't fix it, but, you know, how we operate in that situation. And so that has been really, really helpful. So I find myself always going back to kind of psychotherapy, and I do find that I get a lot of help out of that.
Yeah, it's certainly been helpful for us. I mean, have you guys had that sort of experience where you kind of, what they're saying about your children is helpful, but actually it's just someone else shining a light into your thinking and feeling?
I think by the time you get to therapy, so there's, well, certainly and historically, there's been this, to access therapy, you've had to be in the crisis. And I know that, like, a lot of agencies are now trying to avoid that. So they're trying to say, come forward first. And, you know, if I look at the differences between adopting the first time and adopting the second time, the first time, therapy wasn't even something that was explained to you, that it was going to be an ongoing thing. And, you know, I remember we had a lady from CAMS who was absolutely lovely, wasn't she? And she would meet with us once a month for the first, 12 months. And then all of a sudden she says, right, I'm moving to Australia now. So I don't know who's going to pick you up, but, you know, someone will at some point. And nobody ever did. But we weren't sure what she was there for. I don't think we really had I think we were a little bit naive, and we didn't really think, well, you know, what is this for? What is it about?
Every time we went to see her, we expected her to ask to see the children, and she never wanted to see the children. She always wanted to see us. And we would go in there feeling like a sack of spuds and come out feeling $1 million.
Yeah.
And that feeling would stay with us for a couple of weeks. And, you know, then there'd be a couple of weeks where we'd be worn down again, and then we'd go back and see her again. And I think probably the best advice she ever gave us was we were in exactly the same boat as every other parent that she got to see. And that, you know, although we felt isolated and alone and unique in our experiences, we shouldn't do, because none of those were ours or our doing. They were a common thread with many adopters. And I suppose as new adopters, we felt very much under the microscope, and that we were being judged all the time, and that, you know, we tried our best to get everything right and not make mistakes. And this particular lady was really our support, because we weren't getting that support from anywhere else. You know, lots of people were throwing judgments, but this particular lady in CAMS was saying, guys, it's going well. You're doing everything right, and what you've explained to me is this, and this is what it means. And perhaps she would explain to us what it meant, and we didn't really have a clue before we spoke to her. You know, some of the behaviours she started to unpick and say, well, you know, that's what they mean by this particular behaviour. So have you thought about how you can approach that next time? So she did lots of exploratory work with us, and that was really good. And, you know, I mean, it isn't about us wanting to feel good about ourselves, but it is about us wanting to understand that we were parenting the best we could. And we just occasionally needed somebody to say, actually, it's going the right way. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think that Paula said earlier that prospective parents don't get enough of this support in a proactive way. It's always very reactive, and like Scott said there, it's usually after a crisis. And I really think it needs to be upended so that some of the experiences that we now have as adopters of old, for want of a best word, can be shared with new adopters in a more constructive way, so that they don't feel that isolation, because I know genuinely they will feel that isolation.
And also, if you speak to our older two now, they would totally be against any form of talking about anything, of any therapy, of any counselling, anything like that. Whereas you talk to Jacob, when do I go? What times mean? When do I need to be there? What time are you picking me up from school? Right, fabulous, all this sort of stuff. And that's the difference between the two kind of timeframes, because 15, 16 years ago, I don't think anybody realised, least alone social workers and stuff. Maybe they did. Maybe it was just a new thing. Maybe we were just on the cusp. I don't know. But back then it wasn't something that was going to be forever. Whereas now it's very much so, the ASF, post-adoption teams, etc., they're all kind of very into now explaining through prep and stuff. Well, the majority of them are, we assume, having not been on a prep course for many years, that they're telling people that this is a lifestyle, and it's very much long term. It's not just a couple of years thing. You are potentially going to need therapy, whether it be now or 10 years time. And that's the difference. So I think when we first took that kind of step into, I remember the first time we took one of our oldest to camps, and the therapist said, "So, how many sessions do you think you need?" This is to our son. And he went, "Well, just this one." and the therapist just went, "Oh, right, well, okay, yeah." And that was it. There was no challenge. It wasn't, he didn't really see it as an ongoing thing, which is why I'm saying, I think people thought differently back then. I think they just thought, well, unless you engage, you can't do it. Which to a point is true. We
raised the question at the end of that session and said, "When's the next appointment?" And the therapist said, "Well, he said he only wanted this one, so that's all we're going to give him. We don't need to see him again." And that was a real lost opportunity, because we took that as verbatim. We didn't know that we could have championed him really strongly then and said, actually, we think he needs a couple of 100 sessions over the next 10 years. And actually, not going into finer personal details, but there was a crisis point where actually he was saying, "I need to see somebody." And that service was no longer available to him, and that was a terrible time. But again, as a perspective, as a new adopter, we just didn't know the system well enough as a secondary adopter. So when we adopted again, we were fully aware of the system. We had therapeutic support written into the post-adoption support plan. And certainly day one of arrival into Ireland, I was banging on the door at CAMS and saying, we need to register, we need support, and we need a monthly meeting with a psychiatrist. And that is the support. We were welcomed with open arms, and that was the support that we received in Ireland, and we continue to receive today. Now, the beauty of the service in Ireland that we experience is that we can email her, we can ring her, we can talk to her immediately. We don't need to book in an appointment for 3 weeks' time for the next slot. And if we do have a crisis, then we can pretty much get into that diary in the next couple of days. Now, that's a luxury, because we live on the West Coast where there's not very many people living. But part of me says that actually, if that is available here, then it should be available everywhere. I think.
I think the one to blow Paula's trumpet is that once our third and fourth children, fourth and fifth, it doesn't matter. Some of them, some of the children, once they accessed the services, that I think you've worked really hard to keep that door open. And it's kind of just this silver thread that's gone all the way through there since they moved in 2008, 2009, and even when there was times, like you say, when it was really apparent it was really needed, we could then access it. But then we just managed to keep the thread alive, so we didn't have to go back through the referral process. And that was just a lifesaver, because I had a friend, and I won't say who it is, but you'll know them. One of their children attempted suicide, and it was a legitimate threat. So this is a 14-year-old attempting suicide, and at CAMS they made an emergency referral to CAMS, and it was an 8-week wait. And that's a child like genuinely trying to kill themselves with a serious attempt. 8 weeks. that ship has sailed. And so you just, I mean, again, it's a postcode lottery, isn't it? You see, the service you get in Ireland is obviously, it's a different system altogether, but I think you've done fantastically well to keep that door open. You've built up good relationships, haven't you, as well?
Yeah, I mean, I do, because I like therapy for myself. If I had the money, I would be in therapy myself. I had a fantastic therapist a year just before lockdown, actually, and it was going really well. And I wish I had the money to kind of carry it on. But there is kind of therapists that are involved in some of our children's lives, and it's kind of family therapy because it's come through the adoption support. So they are happy to support us in that, and I kind of push it. Al doesn't see them. He's the offer's there, but he's busy and avoidant.
Busy that day.
Busy and avoidant.
Yeah. Shucks.
And
talk about his feelings. You must be joking.
But, I mean, the thing is, because we're so different, because I welcome hearing about myself. I will welcome kind of anybody challenging me on my kind of behaviours or what I've said, what I've done wrong, or but he is a very different person to me. I'm very open, I wear my heart on my sleeve, whereas Al's very good at being a little shed, keeping the door shut.
A podcast shed.
In his little tree house there, and some days you're allowed in and other days you aren't. And so and it's just that's not a criticism. That's how I learned to be as a child. Whereas I was very open because I was very lonely and I just needed to speak to people. So
it's all coming out here, isn't it?
I mean, that's you've asked me to do it, and that's that's the sort of person I am. You've got to don't invite me on the podcast if you don't want to hear what.
Girlfriend.
Well, I don't think we are too different in that respect, because I think that, and we have, as a four, we spent a little bit of time together over the years, haven't we? And I think there's, even as our parenting styles as couples are different as well. I'm very much kind of more relaxed and tend not to kind of overreact. No, I don't mean overreact. Yeah, I do mean overreact. Sorry. I'll just say it. In terms of some of the behaviors and stuff, and I tend to kind of have a minute just to chill before I kind of then acknowledge it or something like that. And I don't think either of us have ever had kind of any therapy ourselves through the process. You did, but that was for something else. But it crossed over, didn't it? Because it was at the same time when we adopted the first time, and you had some counselling for some stuff that you went through at work. But I think neither of us, have ever had kind of counselling or therapy to do with the stuff that we've parented, if that makes sense. However, when we sit after a session or something like that, I don't know about you guys, if you're in this position, but I always feel knackered at the end of a therapy session. So if I'm feeling knackered as a 40-odd year old adult who,
I think you're in the middle.
Shut up. Then say what must a child be? They must be absolutely shattered as well. Going through all that, because we've not experienced it. We've only listened to it. And sometimes I do wonder. Would it be a thing? Should it be a thing that parents are kind of helped through that kind of minefield of therapy and counselling by having some themselves, actually. It might just be a session once a year or something like that, but just an opportunity to get stuff off your chest and just say, this is how I think I failed this year, but these are the things that I'm celebrating this year, and this is how it's affected my relationship, or all this sort of stuff. It's I don't know if it's a thing.
I think that for me, sort of the stuff that I do around challenging violent behaviour and the support I give to parents is there's this really difficult balance you always come to, whereas you say as a parent you're not to blame for this behaviour. However, if you parent differently, you may have a strong influence over this behaviour. And that's a really, for anyone to say that to anyone, you've got to feel trusted. You've got, and I've had those conversations, and you've got to build up a level of trust. And it's a therapeutic relationship where you can then say to people, your buttons are being pressed here in a massive way. Yeah. We don't need to just like kind of smooth the buttons over. We need to get in there and dig this button out, because this little tiny thing is going to unravel the whole damn family.
Yeah.
And that's not to blame parents in any way whatsoever, but that's just the barefaced realities. You thought you were fine till you had kids. Life was tickety-boo, and then you discovered all of these really interesting foibles that relate perhaps to how you were parented, how you anticipated being, what sort of parent you wanted to be, and that's really hard. I mean, the last session we went to, which was a couple of weeks ago, and I was spitting feathers. We'd had a right old hoo-ha with one of my little darlings, and I was literally spitting fire, and I thought, I don't want to go to this therapist because I know what she's going to say. I know, I kind of, my academic, all the stuff I've read, I know what she's going to say. And it's exactly what she said, but I felt so much better for having someone else look in and go, yeah, your thinking's right. Or you maybe need to change it a bit, or maybe you need to change it a lot.
So do you think from what we've said so far, the thing that's screaming out in my head is this: when we are new to adoption, one of the things that the system kind of engineers is the framing of these things called parenting courses. And we all say, I don't know why they need to send me on a parenting course. I'm a good parent. I'm going to be a great parent. And it's all about the framing of this word parenting course. You have a problem with your child, they send you on a parenting course. You don't want to hear that. No. The local authorities need to reframe these courses. Then they are significantly better than a parenting course. But being the people that we are, we don't want to be told how to parent. And often we don't feel we're parenting incorrectly. We need somebody to shine a light on what's going on the bigger picture, so that we can adjust our parenting style. Doesn't mean we're making mistakes. It just means there's a different way to do what we want to do. And I think that's where the big objection comes in the early days of adoption placements, is that people feel judged under the spotlight. They don't want to be wrong, and they don't want people meddling. They've had a gut full of social workers, and they just don't want any more. So when the system then says, okay, you've got a problem in the family, we need to help you with that. Here's a parenting course, guys.
But I think
people don't want to
for me, talking about parenting courses, it just brings back memories to me years ago. And that was, right. I wasn't told to go on a parenting course. I kind of invited myself on them because I was desperate to learn. But these parenting courses are never written about adoptive parents, about adopted children. I always found they were written for birth families. So even though, you were in an adoption setup, with that, I would kind of challenge them all the time. And I said, this is different. We're parenting differently. These people have birth children and this is designed for them, but this is different. And it was almost like social workers just had this niche where, right, chuck the problem ones in there, go and do your parenting course. And we're so hungry to learn whatever we can because we feel like we're failing with these kids. You go in it and you think, this is not relevant. Tell your child to do this, sit on the stairs for whatever. My child would rather, bite my arm off than sit on the stairs for a minute and all of that, But it's really, really difficult because a lot of the things in place aren't set up for the kids that we parent.
Yeah, I think as well that any course that you go on that is sort of manualized in the sense that it's like, if X happens, do Y. If A happens, do B. And that just is rubbish. It's because it actually compounds how you feel about yourself, because like you're saying about the step. Sit them, if they're 7, sit them on the step for 7 minutes. And actually, we're missing the point altogether. And so it needs to be much more. You need to be getting spanners onto people and finding out what's making them tick, whether they're reactive or passive or permissive parents, and all of that stuff that I think is just. I mean, I don't know how we got here from therapy, but it's all related. And I think if you think back to when we adopted anyway, 2007, 2008, super nanny was a big thing. So it was all naughty steps. It was all all this sort of stuff. All the things now I look back on and go and do a face cam and think, what the hell, And in fairness to Jo Frost, who is super nanny, she has come forward since and said, this does not fit with every style of parenting.
I remember seeing her with an ADHD child. It was one of the last program she did on Super Nanny, she failed. She failed every step of the way on that program, and I remember thinking, "All right, okay."
Yeah.
Sorry,
you felt validated.
Sorry if she's listening. She did her best.
No, she won't. She won't. She definitely doesn't listen to this rubbish.
How rude.
But again, back to your point about therapy, I have to say that probably the best therapy that we've experienced, as in one of our children's experience, that we've had the most results from, has been play therapy, and that's been it's been a mystery, a complete mystery to me. I just sat in the waiting room in the hospital where the appointment was, or I went up to have a cup of tea, and then my child was delivered back to me after sort of 45 minutes, happy and bouncy and, full of the joys of spring. And I never really understood what went on in the room, because it was a private kind of therapy. But I know, from the 10 sessions that we did, I know it made a huge difference.
Massive difference, actually.
But, if somebody said to me, well, tell me about play therapy, I wouldn't have the first idea. All I could tell you is that the coffee in the hospital tasted lovely because I wasn't in on it. And occasionally there were snippets like, oh, it wasn't fair today. I didn't get to build a sandcastle in the sandpit. That's about as much as I would hear.
Yeah. And then we'd contact the therapist and say, well, he's saying something along these lines. And she'd say, well, yes, because I'm trying to teach him that he doesn't always get to do what he wants to do for this reason, that reason, the next reason. And it was actually, it was therapeutic life story work. It wasn't just, so it was through play, it was therapeutic. And it was actually one of Katie Wrench's little friends. Yeah. So little friends. That sounds really kind of
little friends.
Yeah. But what's interesting about that is that those therapists actually are they're niche therapists, but if you can get them, then they're blimmin' amazing, and yes, you're right. Jacob used to come out of them. I know you're trying not to say his name, but we say names all the time. Well, I say names all the time. But Jacob came out of there completely different. And that 10 sessions was just before we moved to Ireland. And the difference in him has been quite intense for us in terms of filling in whatever it was that it filled in for him.
It was life-changing, and we were very lucky that we were able to get funding through the Adoption Support Fund. And it was sponsored by a local authority. They were really keen to do the work. And it came about really, really quickly. And, that was fantastic. And I would just say to anybody who is thinking about play therapy or art therapy, just keep banging your head against that brick wall until you make some progress with your local authority.
I would agree with you totally.
Would you?
Why?
Well, I think you I think that's the danger of any therapeutic intervention, is that because it worked for one person, it doesn't mean that model will work for another. I think you've got to have a fantastic that it worked, and so I often think that the therapy model itself is important, but not as important as the worker. And I also think
I should clarify, Al. What I meant was if you've got art therapy in your sites and you are struggling to get the funding, keep on at them to get the funding. I agree, it's horses for courses, so there's equine therapy. But I mean,
that's not available on the ASF.
If the therapy is right for your child, and you are struggling to get the funding, don't give up. You absolutely have to just keep at it. And sometimes the application process is so demoralizing. We do put it to one side, forget about it, step away. And I think, it's easy to do that because life takes over. But I just would urge anybody, if you're on that pathway, you've just got to keep on at it.
I think really what we're saying is, like art therapy, play therapy, one size doesn't fit all. So like the likes of Jacob, like you said, I can imagine kind of anything like art therapy, play therapy, because he is like that. Do you know what I mean?
Very creative, isn't it?
I think it's the type of therapy that the psychotherapy that we've engaged in, our kids have engaged in, wouldn't be any good, because you're sitting on a sofa and you're just chatting. For Jacob, you'd be leaping around. You know, it wouldn't be enough for him. So that, you know, we have therapy is kind of this long thing where there's lots of different types. Now, for me, of all the therapy I ever did and engaged in psychology, all of that, the psychotherapy to me really worked, and it's really working for my kids. You know, because I think that if we put our children into like the art therapy or play therapy, I don't think they would respond to that, because it's just not their thing. I think they'd be a bit embarrassed, a bit like, maybe our youngest child would, I don't know yet. But definitely I would just say to anybody, you know, look what's right for you and what's right for your child, because that's, you know, that's what's really, really important. I think we all need therapy. I think everybody, and sadly in this country, therapy is looked at as being a bit of shameful and a bit like, oh, you've got problems then. Whereas America, you know, it's like everybody's got a therapist.
Yeah, it's one of the mill, isn't it?
And I do think that to have a therapist, because the therapist is on your side, you know, you go in that room and that therapist is there for you. And so you can kind of discuss how you feel and everything like that. So if you do feel held and cared for, this is my experience anyway, but also just enabling you to kind of look at your own patterns and things like that. And I mean, it's just, you know, something that happened a little while ago for me was I was called a certain name, and it was horrible.
By one of your children?
By one of my children. Yeah. And it came, and one of my other children used to use that word a lot towards me, and I just felt the pain of it really going, and I just felt absolutely crushed. But in talking to the therapist, she turned it around and she says, that name that you've been called is what that child feels they are. And because they feel that, they're throwing that on you. That just lifted. It was a revelation. And so when the words come this time, it just hasn't knocked me at all, you know, because I've had compassion, thinking, actually, right now, you feel you're but actually, you know, the way of you coping with that is to call me it. So I can hold that now. I can actually hold that for you. You know, without that little visit that day, and not being said to me, I'd have been in an argument all of the time about this particular word. So therapy for me is life-changing.
I think that is a really interesting point, because we sort of hinted that we're going back into the past and delving into our childhoods and all of that stuff. But if I can be honest, for the reality of a lot of adoptive parents and parents who have children with additional needs, children who've experienced trauma, is that we experience levels of trauma ourselves, don't we? You know, we can be frank that living with children who are violent and aggressive or with challenging behaviour, the kids are shoveling baggage into us. So we need, you know, it's not that we're going back to when I was a child and what were you breastfed. It's kind of literally 3 weeks ago, this thing happened to me, and someone therapeutically can help you get through it so you can continue to be the best parent you can be given those circumstances. You know, I think that's probably sort of it's kind of a bit of a taboo, isn't it, really? Because we don't want to talk about the fact that sometimes our children are piling trauma into us.
I think as well, what, you know, that particular word, obviously our older adopted children are much older, and they were living and kind of realising the trauma that we were in, and obviously there's ones living in the house with us, so they see it. But I was able to then come and share that with them, and it was like a revelation with them as well, you know, like this particular word, that because they're all like, whew, you know, how dare that child call you this or whatever, a bit protective. But to go back to them and say, actually, this is what the therapist said, and they go, oh, right. And that, you know, in some ways I feel like it takes the angst away from all the older brothers and sisters being annoyed because I've had that, and actually, again, them being able to sit and say, right, okay, we can forgive that because that's where it's at. And so, you know, that particular thing was really, really important. But this woman at this right now in our lives has given us a lot of that. So that's just one of the key things that she said. But she's also said to us, you know, I went in feeling, when two of us went in to see her together, I just sat and sobbed, and I said I felt like a hopeless mother, felt like I had no authority, everything. And she just sat and listened, and she then was able to come back, and she said, you know, you've got 6 adopted children and they're still with you. You know, they're all still with you. She says, that's very, very unusual. She says, I work with thousands of adoptive and foster kids, and it is quite unusual that you've still got them with you, and that's because of the love that you've given them. And that's been like, just in my worst moments over the last few weeks, I can come back to that and think they're still here.
Yeah.
I don't think everybody could, though. That's the thing, isn't it? Because not everybody is getting that support.
I can appreciate that. That is quite tough for people, but because obviously a lot of you know.
But I think that's maybe if you had to choose, if you could only have one, a therapy for your child, a therapy for the parent, the carer, I would probably go with the carer. Because I think that is sustainable. I mean, you can't, and if a carer is willing to engage in that kind of process, they then can continually just give in to that child and have insight into that child. Whereas you can't, you know, like you say, like your example of the child goes, no, I don't want to do this. You know, you can't. You're not necessarily going to see any results from that, are you? But as an adult going in there, you're probably going to get the most out of that. That will trickle down to the child, or should.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I hadn't thought about it like that. I'm not saying I disagree or agree, because obviously for us, it's mostly been kind of therapies for the children, isn't it? But I'm not sure. I don't know. It's an interesting one, because I always feel like we've been therapized after they've had a therapy session anyway. And I think you're right. We learn a lot from those sessions, whether we're involved or not, you know, because when we come down, you tend to get some form of debrief about what's happened or how it's gone. Maybe not in any great detail, because obviously there's certain elements of confidentiality with stuff like this, isn't there? But it's interesting, because I think as a couple who have never engaged in therapy for ourselves, or for us as a couple, or as parents, or as individuals, I can't see how. Maybe this is your time.
Maybe this is your time.
I didn't want to tell you, Scott, but this is an intervention. We've arranged it.
Is there someone famous going to jump through my door and go, right, we're dragging you off to therapy now? But at the same time, there are times where I think maybe we should have, maybe we could have, you know. However, you know, we had a meeting at CAMS a couple of months ago, and we asked to go in on our own, and it was a really lovely.
It was a session for us.
It was a session for us.
We said we've reached a point where we need to see you.
Yeah,
he doesn't, but we do. Yeah, and we came out of that session. You know, and that session was amazing.
We didn't get any. She didn't give us any advice or anything like that. You know, it wasn't really that kind of session. It was just an opportunity for us to say, this is where we're at, and this is how we feel. And I guess it just felt a bit. I like to use the word validated a lot, but I did feel kind of validated at the end of it, because
you need more, I think sometimes you need more of that. You know, like to get some personal stuff. You know, like we've got with this one now. Me more, because I'm the one that goes, but
yeah, I'm therapized.
I'm very busy.
How convenient.
But I mean, you know, I would say just get yourself somebody that you can just tap into, you know, every now and then, because it makes such a difference. I mean, you know, we've had kind of we've had a really, really challenging time over the last few months, very challenging time. But without her, I think we would have just been really quite unwell right now.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, but I think with having her, and I mean, you know, she rang me up a couple of days before Christmas and said, look, I'm finishing for Christmas now. I'm out in the sticks. I'm not at the end of the phone. Do you need anything from me right now? And, you know, and I thought, that is amazing. You know, this is a woman who's probably got thousands of kids to talk to, but she checked in because she knew that I was really struggling, and what do you need from me? And I said, I'm fine. And she says, just remember, you're doing really well. And she just built me up. And it's kind of carried me over this time. So I would say for you two, and for people listening, get booked in, you know, just get that for yourself. It
gives perspective, I think. And for me, I mean, I knew exactly what she was going to say, and I knew what I was going on inside of me. But someone to sit there and say it to you, even though I kind of knew it, you know, there was nothing she said that I didn't know she was going to say. And I just came away thinking, and she just sort of reset me. And I really needed resetting at that moment, because I was just sort of starting to really frazzle in about how all of the things that were flashing around my head about, you know, just lots of issues around control and authority. Those two kind of, lots of, tussling.
You being controlling and authoritative, yeah.
No, the difference between me wanting to kind of control the situation and me realising that I cannot, and actually I can maintain authority, but I'm flippant, boy, silly boy. But that stuff is really helpful for someone to go, you're okay, because it was kind of getting towards the point where I was thinking, hey, is this dangerous? Am I going to have to do something? And she was going, no, you don't. And actually, to have authority, you need to step back and go, and all the things that are kind of like, she just reaffirmed what I was thinking. So it was just fantastic. So we can put you in touch if you want, lads.
Well, I think it's interesting you say that, Al, because that's how I would feel about going into a session like that. I'd be thinking, well, what are they going to tell me that I don't already know? Yes, they might say, well, you could have dealt with this a bit differently. I know I could have dealt with that. You know, I'm not challenging the norm on this. I'm just saying that, you know, for me, unless somebody's going to give me a little gold star on my lapel and a bottle of Prosecco and say, you did well this month, then, but I guess... it's all very well hearing it, but it's also how does it not happen again? Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. So yes, it's fine. You know, and don't get me wrong, I'm not dissing it. I'm just genuinely not dissing it. I'm just saying that for me, I just struggle to hear, yes, you did well. This is where you could have done better. But you know, you're fine, kind of thing. You're doing well. You're doing it the right way, etc. Because I guess it's still that age-old thing that you want a solution. You want the magic pill, and it's never going to be there, because you know, we've talked about therapy tonight and how therapy for individual children is different. Well, so that little golden pill, you know, that's going to be different for each child as well. So it's never going to match. And I think as well, where we live, we're getting some great support. But if we went and sat and said we adopted 3 kids and this is where we're at, I think the reaction would be very different to what it would be in the UK, because the kind of it's a different culture of adoption. You know, so I think that would be kind of that help would be different for us here, wouldn't it?
I think you have to bear in mind that a lot of people don't realise that that one of the key things with therapy is you must get on with your therapist, and far too many people are scared to turn around to the therapist and say, actually, I don't feel a connection to you. I need to see somebody else. I think a lot of people are really, really terrified of saying, no, this isn't working. And they'll sit through endless therapies and just not have that connection or empathy or understanding. So that's really important. You need to you need to like your therapist
and trust them. You've got to trust them.
Yeah, you do. You really do. And you know, if you're in a position with a therapist where you don't feel you can be open and honest with them in that forum, then move it on. Go find another one.
Yeah.
We had a psychiatrist once, and he. This was probably one of the most difficult experiences. You know, it was a time when there was an awful lot of violence in the house, and from one of our children, and so we had a new psychotherapist, right, another new one, and so we were actually with psychiatrists, so he was prescribing something or other, and in there, so there was the 3 of us and him, and we're all sat chatting, and in the middle of it, he said, so. It was all done really badly. So he's kind of wanting us to explain why things are difficult in front of our child, which is kind of triggering for our child, shaming our child. So, right, you know, this is not the way to do it. But he's pressing. So in the end, we sort of said, well, sometimes, you know, Paula gets hit, Mum gets hit. And he laughed. So the psychiatrist laughed, not like a whimsical laugh, like oh, that's a funny thing to say, isn't it? And he went, so you sometimes crack your mum then, don't you? in a joking way, and I thought
you went grey.
I went ashen. I thought, if my daughter wasn't here now, I would have your registration, because I just didn't know what to do. I was beyond myself, and I thought, you're dead to me. There's nothing you've got for me. I don't trust you. You have just made a crap situation worse by validating my daughter's behaviour and pulling the rug from underneath us.
And we've experienced one of those as well with a CAMS practitioner, and we stopped the session because I felt incredibly uncomfortable for my child who was there, and I stopped the session and said, can my child go play on some of the toys outside, because he was really young. And so she said, yeah, that's fine. And then when he left the room, I said, what on earth were you doing? You didn't have my permission to go down this road with my child. We didn't talk about this before the session. And you have no right to take the lead in this without discussing it with me first. Because although you're sitting here for half an hour with him, I've got the next 2 weeks with him to unpick it all. You know, if we're going to do this kind of thing, then talk to me before the session, see how I feel, how comfortable I can go home and talk to Scott, who was at work, and then say, look, we're going to explore this week. But she just went into it. So again, I felt confident enough to be able to stop the session because it just wasn't practical or suitable at that time for us.
I think it's essential, that sense of agency. I think that as well, we can't just be recipients of what our post-adoption service give us. We've got to have a critical mind, and and read up on stuff. For example, like play therapy. I think the NICE guidelines says on page 16. I don't know why I know that. On page 16 of the NICE guidelines on attachment, it says play therapy is not productive for attachment difficulties. And so find out. Don't just because your social worker's been on a course last week and he knows that he can get funding for it, crack your kid into play therapy. Just be a bit bullshit in a way that gets what you want, not in a way that just rubs professionals up.
But I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Like, just as we're on this discussion of therapy, you've got EMDR, which is kind of one of the new things, and I've heard lots of amazing things about EMDR, and I have talked to people and seen people in front of my very eyes that have literally said they go in one person and come out another with just one session of this EMDR. Now, I went to see somebody with EMDR, and it just didn't really work for me at all. And then my daughter went for EMDR, and she wouldn't mind me saying this. She absolutely engaged in it. This therapist was saying, right, where are you feeling it in your body now? And she said, I'm feeling it here. And then she said it was just gone, this stuff. And I kept thinking, well, what's wrong? Why is this EMDR that seems to be doing amazing things for people not working for me? But somebody kind of pointed out, when I was younger, I didn't feel safe. I don't know what it's like to feel safe. I didn't feel safe as a child, and I don't know what safety feels like, and that's why EMDR doesn't work. And so, but then looking at my daughter, who it absolutely worked 100%, was amazing for, changed her whole way of thinking. So, I just think that discussing this, hopefully people out there are thinking, right, okay, maybe some people have engaged in therapy and thought, this isn't working for me. Or, I just think that we need to explore what's right for us. There's lots of different types out there. And I just think that, just try and get what's right for you, whether it be play therapy, art therapy, EMDR, whatever. But if you're struggling at home with your children and you're really kind of rock bottom, not know what to do, look at yourself and just get help for yourself in a therapeutic way, because that's really, really important, because you can only do it. You can only carry on doing what you're doing with that support behind you, somebody carrying you along.
Wonderful.
Was that all right?
Yeah, that was you. You're on a roll now.
I was going to pick up on two things with that, and one was Paula. You assume people listen to this podcast, and secondly, what is she doing?
She's lost her earpiece. It's like it's like Jodwell Banker. You've got dial.
Oh, you've got earpieces. We're just sitting in the study, just kind of, And the other point was, and the other point was,
do you want me to explain why we've got earpieces?
No, you're fine. We don't need to hear that.
So that your audio doesn't bleed into my microphone.
Oh, right, that's nice.
We're only about 273 episodes in now, and I have really tried to explain this to you on several occasions.
Yeah, sorry, your signal is gone because your Wi-Fi's rubbish. Bye.
What was your second point?
My second point was, having spoken to the said daughter, who has received EMDR actually in your family, and the difference from seeing her before she had it and after it and discussing it with her was absolutely two different people, absolutely two different people. And it just goes to show that there is something for everybody, you know, whether it's EMDR, whether it's DDP, whether it's bus model for kind of younger children, well, not even younger children, yeah, there is something there. And it's just, but like Al said, you know, not every size fits all. So it's, I guess it's finding what fits for you. And also that kind of, I'm thinking about adult adoptees now, because, you know, they're kind of sort of herded into this kind of arena of, well, you know, this is what's available to you because this is on, this agency is Ofsted registered or whatever, or they're an adoption support agency, should I say, not Ofsted registered, but they're an adoption support agency. So they're kind of herded into these potential therapies that actually might not suit them as well. So I think it's definitely a conversation worth having to think what might help you rather than being suggested what might help you, because you know yourself better than anybody. And dare I say, us as parents, we watch our children and we watch them with a lot of love, but also with that kind of step back to say, actually, I wonder if that might help, or this might help, or the next thing might help. And, you know, Paula, you've just hit the nail on the head as well with Jacob. You know, he's very creative. So the creative kind of therapies are going to try and help him. Yeah. Granted, he's a bit older now, so he engages with the psychotherapy side of it, doesn't he? More now. But when he was accessing those therapies, that was very much what he needed. So I think it's very much about kind of trusting instinct as well, and thinking, I wonder if that might help. You know, rather than
I think what.
Oh, she's on a roll now.
Oh, she is. Oh, she's off.
I mean, because it is my passion. Therapy is absolutely my thing. But I just think as a podcast, right, people are going to be listening to this podcast, and they're going to, I think maybe many people out there are going to think, I need to find that person for me. Now, we have, between us, we do know lots of people that we can link into and ask questions and say, right, you know, like our kind of the latest ones that we're working with. I mean, she's dynamic, this particular woman, but, you know, if people are living in different areas and they don't know, then we could maybe ask people to help them. Like,
that's a little job for you. That's a
I can do that. I would love to do that, you know, but I just think
send us an email, we'll forward it on.
You know, if it was 15 years ago and I was listening to this now, I would be thinking, right, this is what I need and how do I get it? And I wouldn't have a clue. So I just think that can you offer now something to say to people, if you're looking for the
I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put something on the No Borders website, because we have got the resources page. So I'll look at that over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see what we can put on there in terms of.
There's people like Vicky McEwen.
Yeah, I mean, Vicky was my therapist, and she's fantastic, and she was my daughter's therapist. Yeah. And I tell you what, if you can get her. She's amazing.
No, I see why she's been so involved in the podcast recently.
You need to remember as well that not all therapies need to go through local authorities, adoption support agencies.
That's true. Yeah.
Lots of companies, and I mean, you know, I'm retired from Network Rail for many years, but Network Rail they're a really large company. They provide free therapy counselling for their employees. They only have to ring a confidential line to get appointments. They're free of charge. There's loads of companies across the UK and Ireland, like Network Rail, that provide those services for their employees. The problem is most of the employees don't realise that they will cover non-work events. And so if you do hit a brick wall with your adoption agency or fostering agency or the adoption support fund, then get in touch with your employer and find out if they offer these similar schemes. Some of them will open up some really, really good therapists. I mean, I met a therapist, it's got to be
20
years ago now, and she's a friend of the family because she worked with me after I was attacked at work. But when we adopted the boys and we were struggling, I would go and sit and talk to her to just glean ideas and advice from her, and that was all part of the Network Rail support function that they paid for. But
I just want to say to everybody out there, sorry, because this is my baby. I want to say to everybody out there is hope. If you are struggling with your child or your children,
or your spouse.
But adoptive children, there is people out there. There is people there is hope, and I want to say to you all, there is hope, because honestly, yes, your kids need help, but you need help as well, and you need support. And I just, please ask Alan Scott to point you in the right direction to the people and get it, because you're worth it.
Yeah. Or you can ring Paula on 07.
Yeah. She's busy during school runs, but after that,
exactly. Yeah, but apart from that,
anybody.
But you're on Twitter.
You might hear a nay in the background, but it'll be fine.
I'm on Twitter. I don't look at Twitter.
You're on Twitter, at Paula Wildfire. Shall we wrap that up?
Yeah, I was just going to say so. I think that's Paula does make a good point, and I think that's definitely a part of the website that we could really develop. Actually, noborderstraining.org, because. We do have a resources section, but we've not really developed that. So I think that, in terms of some of the therapies that are available, we could definitely kind of look at that a bit more. And
we've got people like David Benjamin, and I actually did an interview this last week with Lara Leon, who's an adopted adult, and she does existential therapy, and she was just fantastic. She talked about her story and the difference. So there's lots of good people out there. So if people want to put their names on as well, get in touch with us, and we'll just write.
Definitely, and I could put links on and stuff. Yeah, exactly. Cool. It's a really worthwhile thing. Yeah.
Well,
there you go.
So, Tris, thank you as always.
We might be invited next year.
It depends on if you be the top 6. If you get in the top 5, you might get back. I don't know.
I think we've done pretty well, Tris, don't you?
Yeah, we just need to tell everybody to like and share.
No, leave a review.
Yeah, iTunes, leave a review.
But just before we do wrap up, because Al loves control, as you know, so he likes to lead on to this. Is there anything that's happened over the last 12 months, Paula, Tris, that you want to kind of comment on? How's the last 12 months been for you? Don't worry about the time, because Al worries about time, but people will be listening, so it's all good.
Well, Paula. I think it's very sad that we didn't get to Thailand.
All right.
Again.
I did. I did. I was in Thailand 3 weeks ago. It was lovely.
Very nice.
You wouldn't have liked it.
No, I wouldn't have liked no shops. So I wouldn't like no shops.
No markets, no shops. Yeah, you wouldn't have liked it. It will get better. We will be there this next year, I promise.
We hope. Excellent. Fingers crossed. Yeah. Tris, from last year?
I came out of retirement on the 9th of September 2021. I came out of retirement.
Anyway, I think it's time that we ended this podcast now, because I think there's a bit of plug-in coming here.
But he shouldn't plug. It's very good. He's done amazing.
Come on, you've got a minute.
After 3 years of frustration because the Republic of Ireland doesn't recognise FASD, I threw my hat into the ring nationally and set up FASD Ireland. We're 3 months in. It is going phenomenally well. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Website is up and running. Like and share.
Fantastic. Well done, Tris.
Well done. And we who knows? We may hear more of you, mightn't we? On the podcast.
Well, all I'd say is that you will both be invited to the official opening of the offices of FASD Ireland.
Ooh.
We'll come.
Yeah. In March. So we've I say we like it's my thing. I guess it kind of is our thing, isn't it, at the minute? But you're kind of doing it. But yeah, so we've got offices. We take them on the end of January. And we're going to be off. It's going to be our offices, but we're also often offering community hub space to
coffee.
Charities and organisations in the locality. Oh, shush. I'm trying to do a community thing here. All right. So we're doing community space for organizations, charities in the area who need a space, who don't have premises for the evenings and things like that. We've got you'll love this. We've got a training room as well. And we're going to have an AV wall, and we're going to have all the technology and stuff like that. So you're going to love it. It will be nice. But yeah, so that's what's coming up in the first kind of quarter of next year. So it's very exciting for FESD Ireland. And yeah. So, and of course, there's going to be lots of opportunities for No Borders in Ireland then, isn't there?
Well, it looks like it's going to be a very, very busy year.
noborderstraining.org if you want to know more.
Well, on that note of self-publicising and all of that, we've got a fantastic year lined up. So thank you, Tris, for coming on. Thank you, Paula, for coming on.
Thank you, both of you.
As always, Scott, the pleasure was all yours. And
always.
Bon Jovi.
Anchovy.
He's got to play the music now.
Excuse me. I've been waiting to do that for about 10 minutes.
You do know I'm still recording.
Me.
Round the rugged rock, the rugged rascal ran.
Are they watching?
No, they're not watching, Tris. Oh,
I can see, though. You at the back, Casson-Rennie, you at the back. I can see you.
I like what's on your
and
wall.
welcome
You can't do that. You can't do that.
Sorry,
There's an outtake. There is definitely an outtake. Well done, Paula. Congratulations.
What have I done wrong?
He's about to do an introduction, and you want to talk about
do a new one, can't you?
Yes, he can.
Very
he can.
dramatic.
I know, it's just...
Paula, you've got to sit with your finger over your lips like this.
And until we give you the talking stick, you're not allowed to say them.